Get started. So welcome everybody to the December meeting of the statewide California RTPA group. I'm Dawn Batiste with the San Diego Association of Governments, the moderator for the current year. Ryan Niblock, our vice moderator, is working on getting folks admitted. So if you get disconnected and join back in, we'll get you in right away. I'm going to share the screen. To take a look at the RTPA meeting agenda. Our first item is just that introductions are not going to be conducted. So if you are speaking though, please introduce yourself. If you are not speaking, please make sure you are muted. And I'd like to first note additions and changes to the agenda. Between the CAPTI implementation item and the RTPA committee and other reports, I do want to give an opportunity for Paul Golozewski and Keith Duncan to briefly discuss the plans for implementation of the Infrastructure Act funding and the distribution. So we will be having that item. Does anybody else have any additions or proposed changes to the agenda? Ryan, I can't see my screen so well right now. So are you seeing any?
Nobody has their hands up or anything like that.
Okay, great. All right, so the next item of business is approval of the meeting minutes from the October meeting. Those were sent out with the agenda. Does anybody have any comments or changes to the meeting minutes? All right, hearing none and seeing no hands, we will accept the meeting minutes from October. I believe we have Tony Dang on the line, and Tony, I'm going to make you a co-host, although the names moved on me. So there we go. I'm going to make you a co-host in case you have a screen to share. Otherwise, I will let you go ahead and discuss briefly the CAPTI implementation. There was a workshop last week on this. So
yeah, thanks, Don, for adding me to the agenda, and good afternoon, everybody. I just first want to, Tony Dang, Acting Deputy Director for Sustainability at Caltrans, and just want to first acknowledge the technical difficulties that a number of folks ran into in trying to access last Thursday's webinar, so apologies for that. We do have a recording of the presentation as well as the presentation itself posted on the CalSTA CAPTI webpage. Those have been remediated and publicly posted. Don thought it would be helpful for me to just walk through an abbreviated version of the presentation for the group's benefit, since I know a number of you were not able to participate. So apologies for that. The recording is online, and I will walk through an abbreviated set of the slides. All right, give me 1 second while I share my screen. All right, so can you all see my screen?
yep.
Okay. Okay, so as you all know, the CAPTI, or Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, was adopted earlier in the summer. Following that, in August, the Transportation Commission did pass a resolution of support for CAPTI in August. And since then, all of our agencies, CalSTA, Caltrans, and Ctc, as well as our other state agency partners, have been working towards implementing the various items identified within the CAPTI. I won't belabor this because I think this group is pretty familiar with kind of the origins of CAPTI being rooted in Governor Newsom's Executive Order N1919 that really called for CalSTA to leverage state transportation spending to better meet state climate goals. And as a part of that executive order and agency's work, they identified $5 billion of transportation infrastructure funding that would be impacted by what was outlined in the CAPTI, those programs being the ATP, the ITIP, Local Partnership Program, Congested Corridors, SHOP, Trade Corridors, and TIRCP. And as you all know, what is the CAPTI? So, it's a holistic framework for aligning the state's transportation infrastructure investments with our state climate, health, and equity goals, but it is built upon the foundation of the Fix It First approach established in SB 1. It contains a suite of proposed changes to better align planning, programming, and mitigation activities with the CAPTI framework. And it's a balanced approach that really helps to ensure that all areas of the state can benefit from these various changes and acknowledges the need for a range of solutions in different contexts. Sorry. And as you all know, the CAPTI investment framework itself is comprised of 10 guiding principles, and the final adopted CAPTI contained 8 strategies outlining over 30 actions for implementation. In terms of those guiding principles, I think all of you have heard these repeatedly over the past 2 years, but there are kind of 3 guiding principles that are really around the types of infrastructure, transportation infrastructure investments that the state is looking to prioritize, those being building out an integrated statewide rail and transit network, investing in networks of safe and accessible bike and ped infrastructure, and including investments in light, medium, and heavy duty zero emission vehicle infrastructure. Alongside those 3 kind of types of transportation investments, there are 7 guiding principles that we refer to as kind of the how do we invest in those clean transportation options. I won't go over all of these, but it ranges from strengthening our commitments to social and racial equity, to needing to promote compact infill development, to protecting our natural and working lands. The final adopted CAPTI did include a section kind of detailing how the state and CalSTA in particular are looking to approach highway expansion projects going forward. So within that section of the CAPTI, it really kind of spells out how we're not looking to highway expansion projects as the default solution, and we're really looking to scope projects with climate, health, and equity in mind, and really looking towards kind of longer term solutions. It also included language around adopting this approach to be very people first and to kind of renew our focus on increasing access and options and safety for all Californians. And lastly, it acknowledged that there's no one size fits all solution across California, and we really need to really balance the needs of particular contexts as we kind of scope projects. Oh, geez. Sorry about that. In terms of the implementation approach, there's kind of 3 ways that agency is looking to implement the CAPTI. One is to really look towards that investment framework of those 10 guiding principles to drive decision-making at agency. The second piece is the various agencies that have been designated as leads are working very furiously right now to kind of implement these various actions. And then lastly, to acknowledge that a lot of the program guidelines updates that are currently in progress by various agencies will play a key role in the implementation of the CAPTI. In terms of tracking progress, agency hosted the webinar last week to kind of highlight upcoming opportunities for stakeholder engagement, as well as to show some of the early implementation successes. In terms of kind of longer term tracking progress, agency is working to prepare an annual report on the implementation progress with a target release date of fall 2022. In terms of those early examples of implementation, one example that I think is very illustrative of how those guiding principles are being put into practice is through the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan and the ITIP. So the 2021 ITSP for the first time incorporated scoring criteria, and those scoring criteria were very much crafted to align with the CAPTI investment framework. And then we see how that strategic plan then influenced the proposed ITIP. So within the draft 2022 ITIP that was released in October 15th, we see a shift in the types of projects that the state is supporting. So there were 11 projects total that were added as new proposed ITIP projects, 2 of which were focused on active transportation, 8 focused on passenger rail, and 1 on highway investments. And these proposed new ITIP projects total about $110 million. And I think that, that breakdown, I think, really reflects the priorities that were described in the ITSP and very much in line with the CAPTI investment framework. And we saw that, over half of the proposed 2022 ITIP will be for rail transit and active transportation infrastructure for the first time. Next early success is around the transit and intercity rail capital program. So the guidelines for that program were published in November, and it incorporated a number of changes in alignment with actions called for within CAPTI, including the incorporation of a pro-housing scoring element, which implemented action 7.1. It included some language around encouraging the implementation of the California Integrated Travel Project, or CalITP, which implemented action 2.1. And it also included some language to encourage zero-emission transit and rail fleet considerations in projects as part of implementing action 2.3. In terms of some of the programs that are administered by the Transportation Commission, there have been a number of guidelines workshops underway that have included some proposed changes in alignment with CAPTI. So we see that within the Congested Corridors program, for example, there is some proposed changes around including a VMT-related criteria. And in the Trade Corridors program, there's some language around some ZEV infrastructure criteria. A number of programs are also looking to integrate climate adaptation considerations as well as pro-housing considerations. Last example around kind of early implementation is around this issue of pro-housing. So there already are a number of state funding programs that have integrated pro-housing into the guidelines, TIRCP, as I mentioned. However, there's also TCC and the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program and AHSC, which have been directed by statute to integrate pro-housing. And then in terms of the transportation infrastructure programs themselves, we're seeing a number of programs evaluate and explore the incorporation of pro-housing into their program guidelines, including the ATP, the Local Partnership Program, Congested Corridors. I'll highlight that for number 2 on this slide, the Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program, the Interagency Housing and Transportation Work Group identified this as a candidate program to also integrate pro-housing considerations into their program guidelines. Lastly, I'll close out with some of the upcoming opportunities for stakeholder engagement. So next week, Caltrans and CalSTA will be kicking off a roadway pricing work group meeting. This work group is called for within CAPTI to really take a look at and prepare recommendations for how we can pursue roadway pricing strategies in an equitable manner. Also next week, the Transportation Commission will be hosting an equity-focused workshop to really begin exploring ideas for how to better integrate equity outcomes within the SB1 competitive programs. Another opportunity for engagement is the Interagency Housing and Transportation Working Group has kicked off a subcommittee focused on anti-displacement, and in early 2022 we'll be exploring anti-displacement strategy, how anti-displacement strategies can be incentivized through state transportation funding programs, and we'll be working with external stakeholders on those recommendations. In the spring, the Transportation Commission is committed to offering bi-weekly technical assistance sessions to project applicants to the SB1 competitive programs. Agency and Caltrans are also committed to hosting a convening in collaboration with our rural transportation partners. This was an action that was called out in CAPTI, and we'll be reaching out to the Rural Counties Task Force and our other rural partners to pull that convening together. Lastly, in the spring, we'll be agency, Caltrans, and the Commission will be hosting a series of statewide equity listening sessions to gain input from community members and also to help inform structuring the scope and structure and responsibilities of the future Transportation Equity and Environmental Justice Committee or committees that is called for within CAPTI. Lastly, in summer and fall of next year, we're anticipating the Regional Transportation Plan guidelines to be updated as called for in CAPTI. The Commission will be exploring the topic of land conservation within those guidelines updates. The SB1 guideline workshops will be continuing in the summer. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, agency will be preparing and releasing the first CAPTI progress report in fall of 2022. So that's all I got for an abbreviated version of last Thursday's webinar. And again, apologies for all the technical difficulties that happened, but hopefully this provided some insights into what happened there. And as I mentioned, the webinar and the presentation itself are posted on agency's CAPTI website.
Yeah, Tony, thank you very much. And I really, I do appreciate you coming to do this. I did hear on the day of the webinar from several of the RTPA, so it's greatly appreciated that you could come and do this, and we appreciate the posting of the video. I have one quick question before I get to Sarkis, who I see has his hand up. This roadway pricing working group, it's mentioned in your slide there that about 45 stakeholders. Is there a way to find out who potentially is on that working group?
I will track that information down. I anticipate this question and I haven't been able to track that down.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it
would be helpful to know. With a lot of us, we have our, RTPs include assumptions on road charges or pricing or other things. So it'd be helpful to know who's on that working group just in general to stay abreast. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Sarkis and then Yvonne.
Thank you, Don. Hi, Tony. Hope you're doing well. Thank you to you and agency for hosting that workshop. I think we appreciate the transparency and the continuous updates. I think it's helpful. My question was related to what Don had asked. I think that there are a couple of regional agencies as part of the roadway pricing group. So is the focus of the a regional agency participation on regions that are already implementing pricing? If you can't answer that, it's fine, but I was curious about the context there.
Yeah, I'm not as involved in that action, but my understanding is it is looking kind of broadly at it in terms of roadway pricing strategies, which would, I think, include regions that aren't currently working on pricing strategies.
Okay, thank you.
Yvonne?
Yeah, hey, Tony, thanks for presenting. RTP guidelines, can you go over that schedule? Because we're getting ready to start our next update for 2024.
This update was provided by the Commission, and I think what they provided to us was they were planning on hosting a kickoff of the public stakeholder process in late 2022, but I'll defer to Commission staff in terms of an actual specific schedule.
Is there somebody from the Commission who can respond to that?
And if there's
That's
nobody on
okay.
the Commission on the line, I can follow up with Commission staff and circle back.
That's fine. I could get it from them. It's probably Laura.
I
Yeah.
don't see Laura on yet.
This is Teresa, and we will circle back with Laura and see if we can get more information from her.
Yeah, Teresa, and I'm just curious, since BCAG is starting the next RTP update now, just any insight as to what changes? I suspect language circling back to CAPTI, but if there's any other big changes that we can fold into the process now, would be appreciated.
You know what? I wish we would have had Laura come in, because I think that's a very, very good question as you start working towards your RTP. But
yeah, the next meeting would be fine, since it's not going to happen anytime soon.
right,
So.
Don, maybe we can put it on the agenda for Laura to come in and talk about it as to what they're thinking of in terms of language updates to the RTP guidelines.
Yes, I've made a note and we'll
Thank you.
the January agenda. We have Rick Carter, PC TPA, with his hand up.
Hi, Tony, thanks for the presentation. I'm one of the individuals that was having some technical difficulties, so this was nice to get a kind of a compact summary. I do have a question related to how Caltrans tends to look at capacity improving projects. Our agency has a couple of capacity improving projects planned on state highway, and I know the county adjacent to us has a basically a sales tax that includes capacity increasing projects on the freeway. And it's unclear to me if they're looking at sort of the CAPTI approach is limited to sort of the grant funding programs, or if they're taking a broader approach, and that's going to create issues, I think, for locally funded projects that have capacity increasing components to them.
So I think the department is very much committed to integrating CAPTI into all of our work broadly, and I think that what's outlined in terms of the approach to highway capacity expansions is very much in alignment with where the department is trying to go. I think having said that, project specifics matter, context matters, so it really kind of will depend on kind of those particular project specifics. So it's hard to give like a broad answer other than to say that we are very much committed to aligning the department's work with the CAPTI framework.
Thank you for the response.
All right. I'm not seeing any other hands. Tony, I want to thank you again. And oh wait, I see. Well, let's see. No, that was my mouse, not a hand. Sorry, I'm looking. I'm like, wait, Adrian, no. Then I moved the mouse and it was gone. So we're going to go ahead and move on again to the item that I said I was going to introduce here as an additional item, and see if Keith Duncan and Paul Golozewski are available now to just briefly touch on the IIJA funding and how California will work through that for distribution of the funds.
Yeah.
I'm coming through okay, Don? Are you there, Paul? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
I can see and hear you both.
All right.
Yeah, I was going to say, so at our meeting tomorrow, we're only going to have very high-level comments on IIJA implementation. We're still waiting for FHWA guidance and apportionment notice. But that said, I think in terms of the process, similar to previous federal acts, there'll be a work group that'll be formed sometime in the near future. In the past, the federal funding's been split 60% for state programs, 40% for regional and local programs. We used that just this past January with the COVID relief funds. So I think we'd be looking at least as commission staff, that framework again, but figuring out how it fits with the new act, because there's increases for existing programs, but then also the IIJA creates some new funding programs for electric vehicles, carbon reduction, resiliency, and bridges. So figuring how that fits within the 60-40 framework will probably be one of the big discussion points of the work group, as well as within those funding streams, what particular programs or types of projects would be potentially prioritized. So that is all that I have to update on, and I'll kick it over to Keith to see if he has additional comments.
Yes, so just a quick summary. So as everyone, in prior years, the department with commission working would be part of a working group working with local agencies as we go through the new act. CalSTA, California Transportation Agency, is taking the lead role as part of in establishing these working groups. Later this week, it was shared later this week, agency will be sending out a notice introducing and kind of a kickoff to a tentative schedule for these upcoming working groups. And their intention is to have kind of a, what they're referring to as a kickoff or a housekeeping, a level setting type meeting scheduled for later in December to kind of just set expectations, and then have the first working group scheduled for early January. Don within the RTPAs, as well as Woody with the Rural County Task Force. They've provided a handful of names that were part of a prior working groups for the previous act. We've shared that with agencies, so you'll definitely be receiving notice on that. But in the interim period, I know Don has reached out and looking to try to schedule just maybe a brief meeting next week, including Paul and myself, maybe a few other folks from Caltrans, and with the small working group, just to kind of see, just to share some basic information prior to CalSTA kicking off with the more formal working group. So we'll be looking to try to schedule something like that next week. But that's this general. I don't have specifics related to the CalSTA calendar yet, but that should be coming out later this week.
Thank you, Keith and Paul. I do want to let the RTPA group know there is a small subgroup that has had just some very initial discussions to look at, how things went. The last time I was not involved in the earlier subgroup, so we have some folks who were on it who have that institutional knowledge from previous acts. And we are trying to keep the group small and kind of reasonable size when we start incorporating into these additional working groups. But if you really have a strong interest in participating and you didn't before, reach out to me and let me know. Again, we are trying to keep it a little bit reasonably sized. But I see Peter's hand, and if you have any questions for Paul or Keith or for me, go ahead and raise your hand now, and we'll let Peter go.
Yeah, thanks, Keith and Paul. I think the answer to my question is probably it's too soon to tell, but I'll ask it anyway, just in case there are any thoughts so far. Sometimes in past federal acts, especially ones that made big changes like ICE-T, I think it was, there ended up being legislation that went through the state to implement the what the arrangements were going to be for distribution of the funds. So do we have any preliminary thoughts about whether sometimes there hasn't been a need for it. So do we have any idea yet as to whether this could end up leaning towards legislation on the state level?
You want me? I got that, Paul? You got it?
Well, I can take us, you can offer your perspective. Yeah, I think with augmenting the existing programs, there probably wouldn't be necessarily a need for legislation for that. There are some new funding streams. Now, I don't know that necessarily requires legislation. I mean, it potentially could, I suppose, but some of the new funding could be incorporated into existing programs too. So I think it's a little early to kind of say. I don't know if Keith, you have thoughts on it?
No, similar responses. That's part of the working groups that CalSTA is going to be initiating, being very deliberate in trying to evaluate each of the new programs as well as existing programs, and if subsequent legislation is needed, working quickly to try to incorporate that. But that would be part of the deliberative working group, the deliberative discussions as part of the working groups that we local agencies would all be part of.
All right, thanks. Yeah, that kind of makes sense, especially with so many new programs. This may be a time when it's clear for legislation, but we'll see.
All right, I see Rachel Marconi's got her hand up.
Hey guys, just a quick question. Since some of these funds are fiscal year 21-22 funds, are we going to start having issues with obligations and deadlines to obligate the funds before September? And so just curious how quickly we think any of the funds might be at risk of expiring, even though the bill just passed.
Agreed. That is one of the concerns. We know the apportionment notices haven't come out from FHWA. They're expected, I think, the 15th, give or take, so next week is when we first have the opportunity to take a look at that. But that is one of the items we hope to have discussed and vetted, because if this working group does take some time, if we're looking at March, April, that cuts into the federal fiscal year being able to obligate current year funds. So we are potentially, we would obviously put part of that global discussion, but trying to see if we need to have a current year strategy as compared to a latter year strategy, but that'll be part of the discussions, and we'll make sure to share that with everybody.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, because August redistribution, we always want to work to qualify for that, so we don't want to cut ourselves short.
All right, I don't know if we have any other additional questions. We are going to have Paul Schneider talking a little bit about the Acton funding a little later today. So I think we can go ahead and move on to the RTPA committee and other reports. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again because we do have a couple of vacancies that I want to go over. First, I want to say thank you so much to Ross McEwen, who served for so long on the RTPA group and in several committee assignments. Ross is retired, and Kenny Cow is going to go ahead and take on the Transportation Co-op Committee North assignment. Thank you so much, Kenny. And then in the South, Sarkis was our alternate for the Transportation Co-op Committee, and he is taking the primary role from Patricia. Thank you so much for serving for so long. This leaves vacancies in the alternate positions that we are looking to fill. So if you have interest, feel free to reach out to Patricia or Sarkis if he had attended some, to find out what's involved generally in that alternate role. We do try to keep some consistency in this particular committee because they do work on some priorities and items that span a little bit of time. It's not kind of quick and dirty little things that get taken care of here. A lot of the time it's some long-term efforts, and we like some consistency in these committees. So, and then having said that, Patricia has been serving on the Hsip committee for some time in the RTPA rep role, and Ross was our MPO representative with John Asuncion as the alternate. So Patricia is ready to move on. If you are interested in the RTPA representative position for the Highway Safety Improvement Program Committee, please reach out. If I don't hear from anybody pretty soon, I might start reaching out to you. And then we're looking also for an alternate for that, and then a primary MPO representative. I'm not sure if John is interested in moving up and finding an alternate.
This is John Asuncion. Yeah, I
Yes.
expressed interest to be the main MPO representative to replace Ross.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. And then this might be my faulty memory. On the Local Street and Roads Needs Assessment Committee, Gabriel Gutierrez is our primary. Jennifer Solis was the alternate. She's now serving on the Strategic Highway Safety Plan Steering Committee, and I can't recall, Jennifer, if you are still the alternate on LSR, if you'd like us to find another alternate.
I would appreciate finding another alternate.
Yeah, I figured as much. So again,
Thank you.
if I don't hear from folks interested in becoming the alternate, you might be receiving a call or email from me to get these particular positions filled sooner rather than later. And thank you all for serving on these important committees. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the RTPA committee reports. And if Patricia is here and ready to talk about the TCCP, we can move to her. Let's see.
Myself. There we go. Okay, thanks. Sorry, it took me a minute to get myself organized here. There was no TCC meeting in November, and so there's no report for that. I can share that I attended the NAAC meeting, which is the Native American Advisory Committee meeting, and we reached out to that group to have a representative join the TCC. So that was a neat, interesting experience that some things that never would have happened if I hadn't been on the TCC. And then I do not have notes for the HSIP meeting, but I believe there was a meeting, so I will attempt to get those from another source and get them to you, Dawn, for distribution to the group.
Okay, fantastic. Michael, I see you are here. I'm curious if anybody from the CTC or Caltrans has any objection to moving up the federal ruling on the FTA funding item and taking that out of order. Is there anybody on the CTC updates or Caltrans updates who has any objection to doing that?
We're good. We're good in our end.
Okay. All right, then Michael, let me make sure I can find you on my list so that I can make you co-host in case you have anything to
So
share.
Don will actually be speaking, so no need for sharing the rights with me. I will
Okay,
be presenting.
great. Thank you, Michael.
So, of course, and thank you, Don, for reaching out to coordinate this update on this new federal determination. Folks are here today because on October 28th, the United States Department of Labor did issue a new policy which argues that California's Public Employees Pension Reform Act of 2013, commonly referred to as PEPRA, effectively precludes certification of federal grants under Section 13C for those agencies that are subject to its reforms. Now, the determination argues that PEPRA's impacts on transit workers' collective bargaining rights is material and significant, even if it does not eliminate collective bargaining over pension benefits altogether or alter collective bargaining procedures. And for some background, some of you may be asking, why is it that USDOL has this control over federal transit grants? Well, under the Urban Mass Transportation Act of 1964, USDOL is required to certify that employee protective arrangements are fair and equitable before a federal grant can be released to a mass transit provider like a California public transit agency. Now, this new policy does put at risk approximately $12 billion in federal funds that would otherwise be owed to California transit agencies. And this is reflective of roughly $2.5 billion in outstanding emergency relief funds that were provided by Congress in 2020 and 2021 to maintain transit service. It also does include $9.5 billion, which was just authorized by Congress in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That is the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And of that $9.5 billion total, $1.8 billion is what is in play for this upcoming fiscal year. Now, USDOL and ATU being a key partner with USDOL and having established this new policy, would argue that this policy simply returns the department to its historic position, that which was in place under the Obama administration, and that it stands in contrast to the policy that was in place under the Trump administration. In here, I would just stipulate to all of you that that is in fact true. However, it is also true that the Obama administration was twice challenged in federal court on the legality of their policy and lost. In a rebuke of USDOL, United States District Court Judge Kimberly Mueller herself, an Obama appointee, ruled in 2014 that there is nothing in federal labor policy which expressly forecloses all state regulatory power with respect to those issues such as pension plans that may be subject of collective bargaining. And in a second ruling issued after USDOL refused to abide by her first ruling, Judge Mueller further argued in 2018 that USDOL's policy could not be supported by its interpretation of Section 13C or legislative history, and found that the state had prevailed on all issues. Ultimately, the court enjoined USDOL from relying on PEPRA to deny certification of transit grants for California transit agencies. As we talk about next steps, and here I'm going to want to invite your feedback in just a moment, it's important to note that the path forward ultimately lies, at least in the near term, with Judge Mueller. And that's because ATU did file litigation in 2019, and we are currently awaiting the judge's ruling on a motion to stay implementation of USDOL's October 28th policy and on a cross complaint filed by the state of California, which looks to address this matter in its totality. Now, we as an association have helped coordinate support for that motion to stay by securing declarations and support here. We're talking about formal court filings from member agencies, including BART, Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District, LA Metro, Orange County Transportation Authority, and the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority. The state also did secure declarations and support from CalSTA, ARB, and Caltrans. And Caltrans wrote their declaration and support from the perspective of being the clearinghouse for state funds for rural agencies. We also did help coordinate letters attesting to the regional impacts of USDOL's new policy from member regional agencies, including MTC, SCAG, and SACOG. And I would note for you that the SCAG letter was co-signed by a number of other regional agencies, including Orange County Transportation Authority, Riverside County Transportation Commission, the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, the Imperial County Transportation Commission, MetroLink, the Ventura County Transportation Commission, and LA Metro. And I do want to thank all of you who are with us today who joined us in ultimately moving that letter forward. Now, given Judge Mueller's previous decisive rulings on this matter, I would attest that we're extremely bullish that she will rule again in California's favor. And the timeline for her ruling on that motion to stay is still to be determined, but is expected as soon as December 21st. And I would note that December 21st timeline as being one that was presented by the three parties involved in this litigation. Again, that would be USDOL, the state of California, and ATU, but we've not yet seen full concurrence by the court in that date. And her ruling on that cross complaint is expected in Q1 2022. And so let's put aside for a moment our prospective outlook and really our positive outlook on what this court ruling may ultimately say. There is always the potential that something could go wrong on this motion. And for that reason, we are continuing to petition USDOL and the United States Department of Transportation to allow grants to flow to California agencies. And with that, we are soon to be finalizing within this next day, actually, a new coalition letter that is signed by more than a dozen national, statewide, and local organizations that makes a simple request: continue to certify California transit grants, particularly as this matter is being reviewed by the court. And we're also working closely with the offices of Congressman Aguilar and Costa to build support for a California congressional delegation letter that also pushes back on USDOL and that asks for the intervention by USDOT. And so as I close my prepared remarks and invite comments, questions from you all, I want to just make 2 points. One is that if you are a representative of a statewide organization and want to lend your support for that coalition letter, please do reach out to me. We're happy to add you to that coalition sign-on letter. And then secondly, if you are a member of the California Transit Association, you want to support this request of getting more members of Congress to join this congressional delegation letter, please also contact me. We'll provide you with the background materials that are necessary for moving that letter and its consideration before your delegation. We do have a cutoff for signature for both letters of, again, COB tomorrow. And so with that, Dawn, I'll pause and take any questions or comments from this group.
Okay, and I'm curious just to know, we had a briefing with some of our local electeds recently on this. Do you have some sort of fact sheet or this information already on your website that we can access to do outreach?
We have only the communications we've been sharing with the members of our association, and Don, I'm happy to share those with you.
Okay.
For a lot of this information is at least minorly sensitive, and for that reason,
Yes.
we've not broadcast in more public forums, but I can certainly share that information with you.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions for Michael? I really appreciate you being here to keep us updated. I know that you'll be talking to the commissioners on this tomorrow. So, all right. Not seeing any hands. I just want to thank you again, Michael, for making the time to come discuss this with us and give us what you're potentially seeing as the outlook. It sounds positive, but not get ahead of ourselves, and we'll watch what happens.
Absolutely. And Don, my commitment to you is as soon as we hear information around what the court is doing, particularly around that motion to stay, I'll send you a notice and would ask that you share that more broadly with this RTPA group. Many of you are members of my association, so you'd be receiving that directly from me. But in the event that there are some that are not, I will want to make sure that you get that information as well.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to get back to the agenda in order and move to our CTC updates. First we have Teresa Favila on the 2022 Rtip submittals. Go ahead, Teresa.
Thank you, Dawn. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And we're excited to be in Riverside. And finally, after almost 2 years, hopefully we'll get to see some of you in person. So yes, I did ask Dawn to put this in the agenda. I'm sure everybody remembers the Rtips are due to us on the 15th of December. But if you are not going to have a board meeting or you're not going to have an approval solution by the 15th, your Rtip is still due on the 15th. And you need to send the draft and you need to notify us when your board will be meeting. We've heard from a couple of agencies that their board was going to meet after the 15th. So we need to document it just to make sure that it does happen. Also, we will be scheduling the hearings for the STIP on January 27th and February 3rd. The third one would be on the South hearing. Right now, I am operating as if it's going to be in person. So I just need to verify with my people, meaning like Doug and my boss, to see if that is a possibility. So at the moment, we are planning for the hearings to be in person. One would be immediately after the commission meeting in January, and the following one would be in Sacramento. And then the following one would be in somewhere in the South on the 3rd, a week later. So I just kind of wanted to make sure to let you know. If we will be sending out through the RTPA group just a notice and asking for you to notify us if you want to speak. Normally, we have the usual agencies, and we will be putting you in the order that you sent us. And so that's all my comments on the STIP. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Teresa before we move to Lori? All right, so Lori, you're up with the ATP.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to let everyone know that at the meeting this week, I will do a information item on the ATP workshops for the 2023 ATP that we've started. And most of you probably know what's going on, but I'll just kind of briefly tell you, we've had 3 workshops. The first workshop was more background and we reviewed the schedule, and we did have the presentation on the pros housing program. And then the second workshop, Caltrans presented on the Active Transportation Resource Center, their Disadvantaged Community Technical Assistance Program. And then we talked about projects being in a plan for the large project category. And then the third workshop was the Project Study Report Equivalency workshop. And I always tell everyone that if you didn't get a chance to tune into that one when it was live, we will post it, and please look at that. That's always very good for technical assistance on the applications. And we're continuing to do virtual site visits. We've done quite a few already, and I think we have altogether, we have over 70 scheduled. So our spots are filled up for what we had originally set aside, but if you have an agency that is still really wanting a site visit, Alika can probably fit them in still. Our next workshop is, it is next week on the 15th. And that one, we are going to talk about non-infrastructure set aside in the program. This is something that some of the stakeholders wanted to bring up. This was not coming from the commission, it's coming from stakeholders, but we're going to talk about it. So if you have a particular interest in that topic, please attend that workshop. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that I think that we should have a workshop focused specifically with the large MPOs that participate in the MPO component. There's some things that I think we need to work on in the MPO component, and I don't think the larger stakeholder group is going to be that interested in it, but we will notice it, but it would be specifically on issues with the certain things on the large MPO component. But just so you know, anything that's decided there, I will bring back at another workshop for all of the stakeholders. One of the things in particular is the fact that because the MPOs have a smaller amount, we're having issues with projects that come into the state, but then they're too big for the MPO component, and should it be downscoped or whatever. So I just want to get some language down so everybody knows what we're doing on that, because I don't know if we've been doing it consistent. So that's all I have. And the large MPOs, you'll hear more about that. We'll just come up with a date, and as many of you that can participate, that would be great. Any questions?
All right, thanks. I see Carl Anderson.
Thank you, Lori. I'm happy to participate in the MPO workshop, but I actually have a question for Teresa on the last item, if there are no other ATP questions.
Let me get her. Hey, I'm here.
Hey, Teresa. Quick question on for regions that have any remaining CRRSA STIP programming left, do you want us to include that as a part of the 2022 STIP submittal as like an appendix or anything else, or do you want that done entirely separate?
No, you can put it as part of your RTIP submittal. You just need to identify it somewhere that you will be utilizing all your CRRSA funds that came through the STIP. And then just remember, in the PPR, it has to make sure you designate it as a different fund source, not as your regular shares. Okay?
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Teresa.
All right. Next, we have a question from Rachel Marconi.
I was just going to piggyback on that CRRSA question. So even though the CTC won't adopt the 2022 STIP until your March meeting, is there an opportunity for folks that are going to be receiving their CRRSA funds to get an allocation, say, as early as that meeting or even in January?
Yeah, see, that was the issue we were having when we were providing the schedule for the CRRSAs, like, let's do it, let's get it done, because after October, that's it, we're in lockdown. We cannot amend the STIP. The STIP, right now, we don't amend the STIP until, until it's adopted in March. Because we need 2 meetings, so it doesn't really matter, Rachel, because if you're going to be adding a project, we will notice it in January and adopt it in March. So it just doesn't serve the purpose. You might as well just put it in your RTIP. Okay. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for some reason I thought the CRRSA STIP didn't require the 2 meetings, but okay, thanks.
We have to amend it, and it's part of the STIP. But that reminds me, as you know, this is not related, but kind of related. The proposal that Paul has talked about in prior meetings regarding the to request general fund monies for transit projects through the STIP. If by chance that does occur, we are thinking of treating it similar to the CRRSA funds, where it is not part of the regular shares. So just kind of throwing it out there, and so it would not be taking the advances into consideration. So it will be just the straight distribution for all the agencies. through the normal formula that we use for the STIP. Okay. Thank you. That's it. Thanks, Dawn.
All right. Any other questions for Teresa or Lori? All right. Is there anything else that CTC staff has any kind of urgent concern to announce or discuss?
No, we'll see you all tomorrow. It's exciting.
Okay.
Oh, Matthew came on.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I look like I'm sleeping. No, I didn't actually see if my name was on the agenda. I think it got cut off. Or if anyone from my team was on the agenda. But there was one thing I wanted to mention, and actually Tony Dang covered this during his presentation with the CAPTI, which was we will be having an equity-focused SB1 program workshop a week from Thursday, so December 16th. And this is ultimately to share ideas on better integrating equitable outcomes within the SB1 competitive programs. And we're certainly interested in the feedback of our regional stakeholders. If there are any best practices or ideas that any of our partners are already employing locally or regionally, we would certainly be happy to have those ideas shared during that workshop. And so this will not be a workshop where decisions are going to be made on exact language that will go into the guidelines. We'll likely be continuing those discussions through our SB1 competitive program workshops, which will continue in January. But we will, obviously share an agenda and a PowerPoint if we can in advance of Thursday's workshop. Just wanted to put it on your radar. I brought it up at the RCTF as well. We're very interested in having as much attendance as we can.
Great, thank you. So next we're going to go ahead and move on to Susan Lindsay. Susan is going to talk today about the 2022 shop development and complete street elements and how we can work together in future shop cycles for complete street elements in the shop.
Thanks, Dawn. Let me get my share screen up here.
All right, I can see it's up.
Okay. Should be switching over to full view. There we go. So my name's Susan Lindsay. I'm the Complete Streets Program Manager for Caltrans. I'm in project delivery. And this presentation, I got asked to speak a little bit about trying to work with Caltrans on complete streets. I'm going to talk fast. It's a big topic, but I'm available for questions. So this presentation spans a little bit about our planning efforts as well as our design efforts. Some of you may be familiar with this information, but things Caltrans has around planning and local plans, one of the questions we got asked is how are we officially working with local organizations and local planning efforts? So these are some of the ways that we're officially should be working with you all. The first is Caltrans Active Transportation Plans or CAT plans. Our Caltrans Active Transportation Plans are being developed for each district and being made available online at catplan.org. Plans identify and map location-based needs for pedestrian cyclists, but do not prescribe design solutions. So these are needs and gaps, but not solutions. As projects are identified and developed to address these needs, Caltrans planners will meet with local agencies or advisory committees to clarify community priorities. Second, the Complete Streets Decision document is a fairly new document at Caltrans. It's a new policy that advises project planners and designers to review local planning documents and consult with local agencies to ensure project alignment with local plans. Policy additionally requires executive level authorization for the omission of any identified complete streets features that start out in our PIDs. So in-house, we're doing these at PID cycle. They're tracking what we've committed to in our complete streets features, and then they're being updated as features get omitted. Last, we have the revisions to the existing procedures and guidance. We're working on revising our transportation planning scoping information sheets, the TIPSIS. reformatting it to require identification of needs, partners, stakeholders, and public engagement strategies, improving our complete streets section. Quarter planning guidance is being updated to include additional references to local plans. And the smart mobility framework is being supplemented by an implementation guide that directs planners to resources for public engagement, especially within disadvantaged communities. So there's 2 links on this site. One is the catplan.org. The other is the background image excerpt shows from District 1 Cat Plan story map down at the bottom. So for those of you, we'll send out this presentation through Dawn, and people can take a look at one of the CAT plans, but these plans will be available to external facing for all districts by the summer of 22. There's 3 or 4 of them done now. The rest will be completed in 2022. And also I want to point out that every district has a Complete Streets coordinator available to support communication between local partners in the districts. So if you need help finding who to talk to in your local district, we're available to coordinate making those connections. Next, Complete Streets assets. Got asked to talk about what we're doing in our asset categories. So while planners review local plans and identify needs to help us scope projects, our asset managers are also tracking the condition of all the different pieces of our highway system, what we're calling our existing assets, and using this information to help us prioritize repairs and improvements. Complete Streets assets we track currently are in 6 different categories. They're listed here across the top of this slide. There are 4 different kinds of bike lanes, sidewalks, and crosswalks. So these are the assets that we've provided performance targets towards and are prioritizing in our 24 shop cycle. We're also setting performance objectives for how many of these features we're building new and how many of our existing features we're aiming to repair. CAT plans. So the CAT plans, so the lower part of this slide shows the 2 categories that we've broken our assets for Complete Streets into. On the left side of the slide is prioritizing the build new. So these are Complete Streets assets that we're planning to expand our system with. The right side of the slide shows the prioritize fix existing. These are Complete Streets assets that we have in place that we're looking for preservation or condition repair on. So the CAT plans mentioned in the previous slide identified locations throughout the state where we had specific bike and pedestrian needs. To help us prioritize which ones to build or fix first, we developed a formula based on the goals set forward in the State Active Transportation Plan, mobility, safety, equity, and preservation. The preservation goals are applied on the right side of this slide to existing bike lanes, sidewalks, and crosswalks, which have been given priority based on condition of pavement and the visible pavement markings. To determine which build new projects to prioritize, we've scored each of the identified locations on their proximity to transit, which is the mobility, crash density, which is the safety, and equity, which is their either being inside of or impactful to a disadvantaged community. So that scored our location-based needs. Districts with completed CAT plans are using that data to help prioritize projects in the 24 shop cycle. Districts without completed plans will be using that data in future shop cycles. So the asset management cycle, as far as this is really kind of an intro into when it's the best time to talk to Caltrans about when you want to provide input regarding Complete Streets and honestly any of our projects into the cycle. So we're currently working on the 2022 shop, which includes 4 years of planned projects. That's projects 22 through 26. All of the projects in the current 2022 shop were defined in the 2019 10-year project book. So that 20-year project book is kind of showing up in the middle of this slide. It's like the 4th image. Yeah, the 4th image. So this is our progression workflow of documents for asset management. The project book contains the 10-year portfolio of projects and is published and updated every quarter with complete project lists and details. The projects in the 10-year project book are derived from the State Highway System Management Plan, or the SHSMP. This is the performance-based plan that guides decision-making and priorities for the investments we make in maintenance operations and rehabilitation of the highway system. So previously we had the 2019 SHSMP, which is the second document here. It fed into the 10-year project book and the 2022 shop. Now we have the 21 SHSMP, and we're about to publish the first quarter book for the 24 shop. Once that's out, it's prime time to review those project proposals. So the 10-year project book is the best way for you to see which projects we are or aren't proposing in your area. It's available as a downloadable PDF book or in a searchable web interface, and it lists every project proposed. The web interface is at projectbook.dot.ca.gov, which is the website at the bottom of this slide. And it allows you to filter and search by criteria and then select a project to read the details. So you can select under project activities, you can select complete streets activities. And this is a way to see any of our shop programs and what kind of work is happening in them, but it includes the complete streets projects. And it includes projects that have complete streets work inside a larger project. The further out you go in years, the less details are available for any given project. So the accuracy of the information in the book right now is pretty good through year 2026. There's a lot of information available through year 2026. The project book is published every quarter. Quarter one is coming out in January for the 24 shop. And at that time, there will be significant updates to the information available in the book, and the website and the book will update on the same day. The quarter one update coming out in January is the first time we'll see projects in the 27 through 31 years. And the districts will be actively developing project initiation documents, the PIDs for the 24 shop. So that's an ideal time to start reviewing projects in the book, asking questions and engaging with your district for the 24 cycle projects. Last, and maybe this may be the most important slide in this presentation. Once you've had a chance to review the projects listed in the quarter one project book, you can provide your feedback. And one of the questions I got asked to provide some clarification on is, what kind of feedback can you provide for the 22 shop cycle projects versus the 24 shop cycle projects? So you can reach out to your district directly, or you can participate in one of two public hearings about the shop. The CTC is putting on those two public hearings around the 2022 shop. There's one in North February 2022. There's one in South on March 16 and 17. Obviously, the more developed a project is, the harder it is to incorporate new ideas. So it can be helpful to tailor your feedback based on the timeline of where one of our projects is in the cycle. So for projects in the 2022 shop, which is really the projects that are 2022 through 2026, that's a good time to talk about concerns about a proposed project feature. It's a good time to talk about a project feature you'd be interested in omitting. There's lots of time during design development to make comments on aesthetics, minor changes to alternatives, landscaping, bike lane separations. Those are the type of details that it's an excellent time to make. It's not a great time to say that you want, a bypass instead of a bridge. The 2024 shop projects, which are the 24 through 28 that are coming out in the first quarter book, that's an excellent time for new ideas or project proposals, revisions to project proposals, new alternatives, high priority locations. If you have a high priority location for complete streets and you don't see a project in our project books at that time, that's an excellent time to raise your hand and say, hey, we'd like to do something over here. We don't see that you have any projects proposed for this situation. So that's really the time to make significant and major feedback looking at our project books. That's the last slide in my presentation. I'm available for questions now and in the future.
So Susan, thank you very much. I had, I appreciate you coming. I mean, this was one of those topics that some regional agencies reached out to me and asked for, just in terms of knowing the draft shop would be released and just wanting to really have a better understanding of the process for coordination. I do see we have Chris Lee with his hand up. If anybody else has questions or comments, go ahead and raise your hand right now and we'll let Chris take the first shot here.
Hey, Dawn, actually mine's kind of detailed, so I will follow up with Susan offline.
Okay. Great. Anybody else? All righty. Well, thank you so much, Susan. I appreciate this, and I appreciate having a better understanding of how to get involved early to make sure that we're incorporating with those shop projects the complete street elements and not having redundant work going on in our local jurisdictions or regional agencies and Caltrans.
Thanks, Dawn.
So, all right. With that, I think we have Angel Pyle up next to just briefly give us an SB1 reporting update and an update on the SB1 2022 cycle development.
Yep, sure. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So hope everyone's doing well this Tuesday, and I look forward to meeting folks at the commission meeting tomorrow. So kind of excited about that. So first, a quick friendly reminder on SB1 reporting. So I know that there's lots of different funds out there right now, and there's a lot of excitement about things that are going on. Please do not forget that there are reporting requirements that go with the SB1 programs. So whether it's ATP, congested corridor, trade corridor, local partnership program, please do not forget the reporting commitments. Those are important. You will be hearing from us this coming semi-annual reporting period a lot earlier if there aren't reports that are submitted. So we've had a number of folks that didn't receive the notifications. If you don't receive a notification next week, so there you go, the notification will go out from CalSmart on December 15th, and you should receive it. Please reach out to me, let me know that you didn't receive it. That hasn't happened a lot, but in CalSmart, it's usually the project manager that's notified, and sometimes there's a couple of different contacts in CalSmart. What we have found is that sometimes people turn over, sometimes people, they have different jobs, they retire, whatever, and nobody knows what that person did at times. And they didn't know that that person submitted a report on a regular basis. And so that notification then ends up going into purgatory. And then we find it later when we don't have a report. So just friendly reminder, please know that those reports are due, and also the notifications again will go out next Wednesday. If you don't receive one and you have a project, let me know, because then I can also find out who in your organization the notification went to. If it needs to be redirected somewhere, we can certainly help with that. And then the reports will be due January 15th. So I know that with the holidays, that's really hard to think about, but the reporting period will open January 1st and it will close January 15th. So happy to take any questions on that if anybody has any. So Dawn, do you want me to wait for questions for a moment, or do you want me to go ahead and just cover the next piece or the next item? You might be on mute, dear.
Thank you. I don't see any hands yet, so if you'd like to go ahead and go on to the next item.
Perfect. All right. So super exciting stuff. So cycle 3 nominations. So let's talk about those. So we've got exciting projects planned. We've got a lot of exciting things going on, lots of opportunity. I heard your feedback loud and clear at our last meeting that additional time is needed to develop those project proposals. So originally we were looking for project nominations in terms of partner projects, because we do like to partner on projects. Doesn't mean that we can partner on everything that we'd like to, but we do like to entertain that as many times as possible. We were originally looking for those submittals on December 15th. We have extended that to February 1st. So I think that message went out shortly after the last RTPA meeting in October. We were able to extend that. So hopefully that helps ease the load on many people. If you have questions or anything like that, please reach out to your district partners, and I'm always happy to entertain any questions as well.
And Angel, I want to thank you for hearing us and for extending that deadline. Does anybody have any questions for Angel or comments on these items? All right, so we are going to go ahead and move on to local assistance. We had a couple of specific items on earmark repurposing and HIP funding, but I see Mark on the line. I don't know if we have D today.
Yeah, D may not be coming in, so I'm filling in for D for now, and then so I have a few updates, and then I'll turn it on over to Robert.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Mark.
All right. So thank you and welcome. So a couple updates on the bridge program and the highway safety improvement program. Just some FYIs. So local assistance is continuing to work on the value analysis effort on the HPP program. We are in the process of identifying some action items for improvements of the program. We should have these action items identified early next year. We are beginning to categorize these actions into short terms, medium and long-term items. And we're hoping to have that report out to share early next year. And another heads up on the Hsip. We are preparing documents to get ready for an upcoming call for Hsip projects for cycle 11. And just as a reminder, as you know, that a local road safety plan will be required in order to apply for your cycle 11 Hsip funding. We are beginning to work on the next local assistance training day. Our teams will be reaching out soon to the Rtpa group for feedback and begin developing the agenda. We are going to be currently targeting the next local assistance training day at March of 2022. An update on inactive rates. Want to congratulate that we have already met our 2% inactive rate goal for the first quarter. That is tremendous work, and it also is a result of the great work that we have done as far as the inactive rate on the previous quarter. So good job on that for meeting the goal already for the first quarter. And then the last one for me before I turn it on over to you, Robert, is just a quick update on our OA. As of November 30th, we have used a total of 24 million in OA. Using the projections of the last year's FAST Act, that is equivalent to a 2% OA usage. If you are going to compare that to last year we were at 1%. So we're really mimicking the delivery as of last year in regards to the OA. That concludes my report. Any questions before I turn it on over to Robert?
I see Yvonne has his hand up.
Hey, Mark, will Hsip cycle 11 be state-only funded?
So yeah, and I see Robert shaking his hand, but yes, that would be state-only funded. That would be utilizing that SB 137.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just, yeah, Yvonne, the intent is always to exchange our Hsip funds with the state side as much as possible. You know, there's no guarantees that, you know, the state might say, you know what, we've got so much federal funds that we can't make this exchange. So obviously it's a year by year, but the intent is always to try to exchange it and use our the state funds for the Hsip from here on out.
Okay, so unless we hear otherwise, assume state-only funded moving forward.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so I got a couple things on a report on, shouldn't take too long here. As far as the repurposing, as you know, that this is a earmark repurposing of old federal funds that have been repurposed, projects funding that has legislated that they didn't, there was no sunset on them. And so there's been the last number of years, these funds have been repurposed for other means, but there's some restrictions. And one of them is, of course, projects have to be closed out. And so there's some things that the feds want before they can be repurposed. So for last year, there was 6, I believe, that applications went in. Unfortunately, only 2 were approved. 4 were rejected because of they were still open, or final vouchers. They weren't final vouchered. So that's just a and according to what FHWA said, it sounds like one even got opened backed up for whatever reason. I guess it was closed and then it got open. So just to be aware that when the FHWA takes a look, they go into their system, and if they see they're closed, then they'll go ahead and approve them. But if anything is not according to the guidance, then they get rejected. So that doesn't mean you're going to lose out on those. It just means that they're going to be pushed out for the next funding, which is this year. So usually that you'll see the repurposing announcements come some early next year. If you see last year's guidance, you could probably even look at and follow how it'll go this year. So if you have any more information on that, please contact Bill Hong of my staff. He's the earmark coordinator, and he can help you out on any specific questions, especially on the ones that were rejected. Then as far as for this year, nothing we haven't received yet anything from the FHWA, but then again, it's fairly early in the year. Of course, it's December, so you should be hearing. But once we hear something, we'll be sending out those that correspondence to everyone.
So, Robert, do you know if the Infrastructure Act rescinded any of these old earmarks so that there may not be potential repurposing in the future?
Don, you asked a great question. As far as I know, I haven't seen anything that they've rescinded that, but then again, I'm not that much into the weeds as far as the details of whether they've taken any of those funds and have obviously it takes a legislative action to make that happen. So I haven't seen anything. We haven't heard anything from our FHWA partners on that. So my intent, or right now, my understanding is it's going to continue as is until we hear anything further.
Okay, and is it possible, so I was involved in the original first round of repurposing, and at that time, the list of earmark funds that were remaining around the state was pretty massive. And so we set some criteria, just filtering criteria, because there was going to be so much work involved in repurposing. Is there a way to revisit that criteria for how we filter what is eligible in California? Because I know in local assistance, we looked at things like how much of the OA was remaining. And if the portion of earmark didn't have its own OA, we weren't putting it on the list to be repurposed. But regional agencies under those previous statutes could use regional OA to get to that sliver of the earmark. And so it would be good to see maybe if we could revisit to finish clearing up some of these earmarks and getting them off the books.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I do know that there was some came with their own OA. Some the agencies had to use their own year, the federal fiscal year OA, so they were not interested. Yeah, so nothing is consistent in there, but we can take a look at that.
Okay, I think it would be good to double check that.
Okay.
All right. And then on the HIP funding,
For the HIP, yeah, just a kind of a good news, I guess, with the at 18-19, as you know, 17-18, we basically had to sprint to the end to obligate all those funds. I think we just left just a few dollars on the table, but it really was very insignificant, I guess, in the whole funding picture. But for this year, we do have we had 138, we started out. And now that agencies have gotten to, looking at the eligibility and putting it on projects, They've been very good at obligating their funds. So the last time I checked on our website, we haven't, Bill Hong informed me that the November report, which is going to come out and get posted soon, there's not much difference in the October, but we only have about 20% left to obligate. So I counted up the agencies that are still on the list, and it's on our website. You can go take a look. I counted up 25 local agencies still have some obligations left on the book. So like last year, we're going to be reaching out to those through the DLAEs to make sure that the agencies are aware, and if they have plans to obligate, and like last year, maybe Jose Luis can take the opportunity to start doing some agreements if needed. But I do know our budget office was a little concerned at the very end there, and so he did. There was mention that there might be some deadlines, so I might reach out to them, ask if they're still interested in that. But we have 26.2 million left of the 138, so I think we're doing a pretty good job. So if we can get agencies to obligate their funds here within the next couple months, get it down to just a little bit, maybe those deadlines won't need to have to occur. So that's it for HIP. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for local assistance?
Hi, Don. This is Jose Luis.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I made the terrible decision of booking my flight during the RTPA meeting. Has local assistance talked about CMAQ and RSTP apportionments flowing to the state?
Yeah, Mark and Robert, this is related to this year's apportionments that had not been loaded, I guess, into this year's apportionments information or tables yet. Is that correct, Jose Luis?
Yeah, I was noticing SACOG, we still haven't got our CMAQ or RSTP for the year. I was starting to wonder when those funds might come in.
Right. So on the CMAQ, and I believe Sanjaya got back to you, but on the goal is, as far as the CMAQ funds, you're right. We don't have those loaded. The goal is that for FHWA to have the notice on providing the apportionments to the states within 30 days of the enactment, and with the enactment of the IIJA. This may take a little bit longer to make with the funding available to the states and FEMA, since that requires more detailed funding calculations. So we are hoping to get more of a notice and guidance by the 15th of December, but we are looking for some time after that to actually get the funds available in FEMA after that. We don't have a date, so to say, on when that's going to be loaded into FEMA, but that is something in our conversations with Federal Highways is being worked on. But correct, it will take a little bit time for us to get those into FEMA once we get the notice of the apportionments to the states.
So Mark, I have a question. Is there, does California have a CMAQ balance from previous acts? And is there something about this, getting the new CMAQ into FEMA that is going to prohibit somebody with a CMAQ project from obligating it or from converting AC if there is a statewide balance of CMAQ?
So, so those details I don't quite have with me, Don, but from what I understand from now is that we do have Sajaya here, that it may impact a little bit of delay, and I think Sajaya has a little bit more information on that.
We have a small CMAQ balance. It depends on what the request for authorization is. As of now, my office hasn't stopped any of the authorizations. If it is a large project, and Jose Luis, I'm aware of the one that you're referring to, and we might have to hold it for a little bit longer. But I'm really waiting for FHWA's update on December 15th. I think I can come back to you with a better response on that then.
Thank you, everyone. And then, Don, I can stand by to talk about the Highway Bridge program whenever you need.
Okay, so that was the last of the Caltrans updates for local assistance. If you want to go ahead and talk now. So if you are not aware, Jose Luis is on the Highway Bridge program. He's on the committee, and so he has attended some meetings recently. And go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, just a little more context on that. We have RTPA representation on several advisory committees. We don't formally have RTPA representation on the Local Assistance Highway Bridge Program Advisory Committee. CalCog does have 2 spots for MPOs, and currently SACOG and MTC. Well, actually, not just currently, for the last 5 years or so, SACOG and MTC have been representing kind of the MPO or regional angle. But because we're not RTPA, we don't regularly come and give reports out. That said, I'm giving a report out. So if folks haven't heard, the IIJA has money for bridges, kind of 2 categories. One is bringing back the bridge program as a federal program. And the second one is a discretionary, competitive, nationwide bridge program that I think is for well, I know it's for more expensive bridge replacements, repairs, like in the 50 million and higher range. The discretionary program is going to be really helpful for the Highway Bridge program because there's multiple high-cost bridges in the Highway Bridge program that are just really sucking up the air for the rest of the bridges that need to put here in California. But then the standalone Highway Bridge program tested on the committee, and we don't know for certain which way California will go, whether California and the regions and the Ctc will make this Highway Bridge program a plus up to the existing Highway Bridge program, or whether this new federal Highway Bridge program will be proposed to replace the Highway Bridge program. That said, I can tell you what
You're cutting out just a little bit.
Bridges. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you repeat what you just said about plus up versus replacement, and then I lost you after?
Sure. What was a little bit more? What was the last thing you remember me saying or heard me saying?
You mentioned we weren't sure if it was going to be treated like a plus up versus a replacement.
Right. In fact, let me just pause there. So a little bit of context. You know, there's new staff all over the place, and even some of us veterans might forget. There's a California Highway Bridge program that we created ourselves here in California. We thought it would be good and right to keep funding the rehabilitation and replacement of our bridges that are not on the, that are not the rural counties, the urban counties, and cities, we all have these bridges that need repair and replacement, and the Highway Bridge program pays for those. But there isn't a federal Highway Bridge program anymore, not since FAST Act, maybe before that. Instead, our regular regional funds that would come to us, MPOs and RTPA, would use to pay for our bridges. There's an asterisk there. There is an off-system bridge program, but I'll move on. Anyways, we've been paying for our bridges through our own regional funds. This new standalone federal highway bridge program could be an increase to how we pay for bridges. Like we could use the funds we've been using plus the new bridge funds, or it could be a replacement. And this is going to be a topic of discussion and decision making that the RTPA, MPOs, counties, Ctc will have to make. And at the advisory committee, we didn't have any clear understanding other than the funds. It's going to be probably months before we see them flowing in California. So it's just my last kind of thing is if anyone was looking for a big windfall of highway bridge program funds, my best guess is we wouldn't see that at least for 6 months because a lot of decisions have to be made before then.
Okay. Anybody have questions for Jose Luis, who is again representing, he's an MPO representative with the CalCog group on the HBP. And is there an interest in getting additional updates from the HBP advisor group on a regular basis? Any comments? All right, so Jose Luis, I'm going to go ahead and defer to you to let me know when the Highway Bridge Committee meets and has these types of discussions that you feel are important for the RTPA group to hear, and we'll get you scheduled on the agenda when they are. And we appreciate your letting us know about the most recent discussions. We did talk earlier, probably while you were on your flight, about the subgroups and about some of the discussions that will take place regarding implementation in California and distribution of the IIJA funds. And next up on the agenda is Paul Schneider, who is going to give us FHWA updates and talk about the IIJA for us.
Will do. Thanks, Don.
Okay, thanks, Jose Luis. And Paul, I made you co-host, so hopefully you can share your screen on your end. And if not, please let me know and I'll have your PowerPoint up.
Right, thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm gonna attempt this, and if I can't make it work, thankfully, I know Dawn can. So there we go. Let's try this.
All right, I can see it.
There we go. That's working, right?
Yep.
All right, so just circling back on what a couple of people mentioned about November 15th for a notice of funding, that's an estimate. So there is absolutely no guarantee that's going to happen on the 15th, but you know, I know that our staff back in headquarters is trying like crazy to get those notices out as quickly as possible. And right when the bill was signed, the hope was that the funds would be loaded into FEMA's end of December, early January at the latest, so that we can start authorizing projects with those under that new legislation. So if that happens, that would be great. Okay, so Federal Highways came up with a, our headquarters office, probably working with the Secretary's office, came up with a 73 slide deck that I will provide Dawn so she can distribute it to everybody. And it's really good. It has a ton of great information about all the programs, funding levels, yada, yada, yada. So I took that 73 slide deck and cut it down to like 45, 47 or something like that for this presentation. And I am only going to dwell on maybe 12 or 15 of them, you know, for about, you know, a minute or so. And the rest of them, I'm just going to blast through to let you know that information about these different discretionary programs are available. I mean, there's so much information in that 73 slide deck, and even this one that's cut down, you can spend at least an hour and a half on it, and we are not going to do that. So you'll notice like some yellow highlighting on a lot of these slides that come up, that I'm just going to talk about those yellow highlighted areas that I highlighted personally. And you'll probably see other information on the slides. You're like, hey, what? Can you go back? But so I'm going to just blast through that, but just know that the slides are very self-explanatory. They're very detailed in that 73 card slide deck, and so you will receive that. And then, of course, at any point in time, you know, you guys can get in contact with me. I'm going to be on that Caltrans, CalSTA, IIJA group that is going to do meetings every 3 weeks, starting really soon, all the way through the end of April, to answer stakeholders' questions. So anyway, a lot of opportunity to learn more about it. So this is going to be fast as far as any particular slide. All right, so you can see this on this slide. You can see that our contract authority, that's that contract authority. What that means, that's the money, that's the amount funded through the Highway Trust Fund. And so that's the 5-year amount for the IIJA. We're calling it BILL right now, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So I'm going to call it BILL here. And so anyway, that's about a 29-30% increase over the FAST Act. That next column over, that's the amount of money, and that's where the big increase comes from, is from general fund. Just to, so there's $47 billion actually coming from that's going to be dedicated from the general fund. Compared to the FAST Act, the FAST Act had $1.1 billion dedicated from the general fund. So that's where a big increase for us came. All right. So there's 9 categories of HIP funding that we'll talk about from the general fund. That's from that 47 million. I'm going to talk a little bit first about the core programs. Well, no, I'm not. I am going to talk briefly about the 9 categories that are funded by basically the Appropriations Act that will move money from the general fund and allow us to use that. So there's as we've just discussed, the Bridge Formula Program, by far the biggest program that's going to be funded by those general fund funds. And then again, it's the Bridge Investment Program discretionary. There's a National Electrical Vehicle Formula Program, infra, we all know about that. Appalachian Development, I've heard about that here. A Reconnecting Communities pilot program, that's an equity-based program. Ferry boat program's been around. Reduction of truck emissions at port facilities, and the UTCs, they've been around for a while. So those are the 9 HIP programs that are funded from the general. So that's, if you total that up, that's that 47 billion that was shown in the right column from the previous slide. This just shows the flexibilities of the of each of the program who can apply for them. You can see that MPOs and locals basically can get after almost all of them except the bridge program formulas given directly to the state, as well as the core programs. But in most states, including California, the state then divvies the apportioned program out, and I assume they're going to do the same for the bridge program at that 60-40 split. No one has told me that, but I think that's a safe assumption. You can see there's a lot of opportunities for MPOs, local governments, and tribes. All right, so those are the new apportioned programs. That means those are the 8 programs funded out of the Highway Trust Fund. We're all familiar with the first 6, and those 2 new ones, they're pretty lightly funded. Carbon Reduction Program and the Protect Program. The Protect Program is basically for implementing resiliency projects. Those 2 funds, and I'll tell you how small they are for the state of California. Carbon Reduction Program, I think on average, California is going to get about $115 million a year total out of carbon, and Protect, I think about $125 million per year for the entire state of California. So those are not big programs. And they're very consistent with the amount from the freight program. And I think you guys understand how that isn't a big chunk of cash for us. So I'm going to go over in the slide deck, the 73 slide deck that I'm going to send you. There are these types of tables for every one of the core programs. I only included a couple of them because I didn't include the programs where there was pretty minimal change in the eligibility or anything else. For NHPP, basically you can start funding underground public utility infrastructure, which I think is good for all the metropolitan areas, and resiliency improvements. STBG probably had the biggest changes in it. New eligible project, eligibility projects are EV charging station, protective features for resiliency, wildlife crossing projects. A big change is the increase in the off-system bridge set aside. It was 15%, that is going up to 20%. So again, for off-system bridges, so that is going to be, you add that amount for off-system bridges to the bridge formula program and the amount the locals will get from that, as well as the bridge discretionary programs. I'm very hopeful that in the future, when this, the way it plays out is that there is a lot more money for local bridges. Sub-allocation, this is kind of interesting, actually makes a lot of sense. You know, right now, or previously, we had 3 categories for the sub-allocation. It was greater than 200,000. There was less than 5,000, and there was 5,000 to 200,000, which always seemed to me kind of strange because there was the MPO split at 50,000. So they recognized that in the new legislation. Now the sub-allocation is going to be split in 4 different categories. And lastly, pretty interesting, in that rural areas bottom row, there will be funds made available for maintenance on non-federal aid highways in rural areas. So I think everybody will recognize that could be a very helpful provision. Let's see, for the transportation alternatives set aside within STBG, there's increase in funding, setting aside 10% of total STBG funds, and for locals, again, that's pretty good. It increases from 50% to 59% the portion of transportation alternative funds that'll be sub-allocated to areas of the state based on population. So again, that's additional funding in for TA of transportation alternatives funding for locals. And that bottom line, that's kind of a big deal. Federal share provides for federal share up to 100% for those TA projects. That's a good thing. HSIP program, I'm not sure, you guys probably are pretty aware, you know, way back when we could fund educational, you know, basically soft types of things out of the HSIP, and then I forget if it was MAP 21 or the FAST Act that cut that off, and you know, where it had to be in a capital project, and now they have re-added those, you know, enforcement, emergency services, and stuff like that, educational programs that can be funded. HSIP, I think a lot of organizations are very happy to see that those types of activities can be funded by HSIP. So this is the next section, talks about the different programs that fund, that they are essentially related to safety. So there's a new Safe Streets and Roads for All discretionary program. I'm not going to go over that in any detail. There's a wildlife crossing pilot program, another discretionary program. You can see put 350 million. That is a pretty small amount on a national level. Let's see, other safety provisions, I think, for those of you that are involved with the manual uniform traffic control devices, FHWA has not in the past updated it very frequently, and probably in most people's opinion, not even close to frequently enough. Well, Congress decided to make sure that that was never going to happen again, and is requiring us to update the METCD every 4 years, which will actually end up a lot more changes that are proposed by states and locals will end up getting into PCD as a result of that. I took out the slide about Davis-Bacon and Buy America. Buy America actually got a little worse, where it's not just applied to steel, it's applied to quite a few more construction materials. I took that slide out, but this is to me is huge. Now there are no more prohibits of local hiring preferences. So, basically any federal aid funded project, there can be local hiring preferences on construction projects. So I think a lot of organizations would be very happy to see that. Climate and resiliency programs. Carbon reduction program, like I said, it's not real big for California, around $115 million a year on average. In the Protect program, that's for implementing resiliency. That's about 125. And that's formula programs. And then there's the Protect discretionary grants, 1.4 billion. Nationally, charging and fueling infrastructure, basically for EV charging stations and hydrogen, propane, natural gas fueling infrastructure. National Electric Vehicle Formula Program, and it's actually formula and discretionary. So there's a lot of opportunities there. Congestion relief program, very lightly funded discretionary program, $250 million nationally. And then, as been discussed, the bridge programs, there's the bridge formula program. 27.5 billion is a good chunk of money. So that is definitely going to benefit the state of California in a big way. Bridge investment program, of course, there's a discretionary program also. When you look at that 12.5 billion, traditionally California can count on about 10% of that. So that's a fairly decent chunk of money also. Then the equity programs, there's the Reconnecting Communities pilot program, which is a discretionary program, funded at $1 billion. And then there's the Rural Surface Transportation Grants discretionary program also. There's a pretty interesting one. All right, and then there's some there's a National Infrastructure Project Assistance Program, big projects. I'm not sure, I haven't really looked into that one. A local and regional project assistance program, which is another discretionary program. So, I'm going to send you these slides. It would take quite some time to go into each of those programs. Obviously, for program change, which we all know is a discretionary program, it changed somewhat. There's a reduction of truck emissions at port facilities program. Obviously, that for Port LA, Oakland, Long Beach, there's a good chance that we will end up with some of those funds in California. So there's some changes to Metropolitan Planning Program. You guys probably are aware of a lot of these changes. Requirement to consider equitable and proportional representation of population of the planning area. And yeah, so The MPO designates officials or representatives for the first time. Let's see, consistency of planning data. When there's multiple MPOs in an area, and of course we have that in numerous locations. Public participation process changed a little bit. Use social media, web-based tools, etc. Travel demand modeling. There's some requirements there, and at the bottom there, safe and accessible transportation options requirements that each MPO use 2.5% of funds apportioned for planning on one or more activities to increase safe and accessible options for multiple travel modes for people of all ages and abilities. Let's see, and there's a prioritization pilot program, discretionary, transportation access pilot program, which I'm just going to blast through these, accelerating project delivery. There's some environmental provisions that should really help the environmental process. How those are going to be applied in NEPA assignment states is question. We don't know the answer to that yet. That will come out in guidance and possibly rulemaking as far as how that applies to NEPA assignment states. The increasing the threshold for CE projects, receiving limited federal assistance, that should be very helpful for those of you that are aware of that requirement. And all right. All right. Reporting requirements. We're getting into, in the past, there's only been environmental reporting requirements on EAs and EISs, and it looks like we're also including CEs, at least D-list CEs at the very least. The MOUs are not going to have to be updated as frequently for NEPA assignment. For our office in Caltrans, that is huge. We do it seems like every time we turn around. Anyway, so there's some changes to the ER program. Extends from 180 days to 270 days time period which an ER project is eligible for emergency repair. So that's a good thing. Let's see, preliminary engineering is an interesting one. So that whole issue of having to advance the project, after you've authorized PE in 10 years. So the interesting thing will be to see how FHWA handles all the projects that were authorized under that different law. So either that'll just remain the same, and that would be the default, that generally whatever laws and regulations are in place when you authorize a project, that's what they have to live with. I suppose there's a possibility that someone could change that decision and decide to forgive the ones that are currently in that predicament. If you really think through that, it'd be kind of interesting if we didn't give basically a pass to all those existing projects. That means even projects that were authorized in 2020, in 2030, we'd be looking at paying back, if they had an advanced project, even though the law has been off the books, or requiring, the advanced project in 10 years. I mean, it just seems like that'd be interesting for our office, but
yeah. So Paul, we're running up against 4 o'clock. I'm wondering. Oh,
and that was
at
it.
the end. That was it.
That was it.
Wow. Well, I do appreciate you kind of blasting through that for us, and it's a lot of good information. I'm sure we may have many more questions as we, review the whole deck, and I will send that out when I get it from you. Just you were our last topic other than addressing, any new issues or next month's meeting. So I do want to give folks an opportunity if they have any questions. I know it's going to be a lot to digest. One of the things that I had seen, Paul, and Peter, I'll catch you in just a minute, was I thought when I read it, there was some potential for a pilot project related to matching rates and matching provisions in the bill. And a state like California that contributes so much state funding, SB1 funding, and self-help counties funding, I was hoping might be, willing to entertain taking advantage of that, so we can potentially have some, fewer total federal funded projects,
Right.
but flexible, match rates on the projects.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I do know there's a number of programs that went 100% federal match, but I'm not familiar with that. So once you look through the slide deck, if you don't see that and you want some clarification or additional information, just send me an email. I'll be happy to look into it for you.
All right, great. And Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, so Paul, I agree. I'm kind of surprised by that provision about the that you said at the very end of the presentation about the 10-year deadline. And right. I'm not sure. Maybe you said this, and I'm not quite sure if I was hearing something. Is there any? Is that requirement just completely gone, or is it only for projects that get approved from here going forward, or only for projects that were approved in the past, or is it for everything? Or do we know it?
We don't know yet.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure our headquarters office and especially the lawyers are all getting together and trying to figure out what they're going, how they're going to interpret that.
Well, yeah, we'll anxiously await the news.
Rachel?
Thanks a lot. This was the most comprehensive and helpful presentation I've seen so far on the IIJA, and I'm excited to see the slide deck. I am curious, are there some of the slides that you didn't share, because of course you're FHWA, are there similar slides for the FTA side that could be shared, or?
I don't know. I know.
Okay.
I will, I can reach out to FTA and see if they've done that, and I will get back with you on that.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else?
Hope you'll get back to everybody on that. Thanks.
Yeah, when anybody asks me a question, I will send the response to Dawn, so Dawn can get that information out to make sure that it's not a subset of this audience.
All right, now I don't know if we have some CTC staff still on the line. The January meeting is scheduled for Sacramento. I don't know if it will be a hybrid meeting or solely in person, but for those of you who are expecting to be in Riverside tomorrow, I look forward to seeing you. Any other items or issues or potential topics for next month? Please feel free to send them to me via email, and I will get follow-up items out to you. One final announcement. I heard from Alicia Segura-Smith, and we have a few agencies, we're down to just a few, who still have not submitted their LSR reports. I asked for some specific contacts from a few of the RTPAs. So if you are in San Bernardino, Imperial, Riverside, Butte, Contra Costa, Santa Cruz, Yuba, LA, Amador, or Shasta counties, you may have an agency on the list, and please be expecting to hear from her. And that was it. Thank you all for attending today.
Thanks. Great meeting, Dawn. Appreciate all the great information from all you wonderful presenters.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.